now extinct, and you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past, and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses, and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong.
You're watching WION World is One. Time now for Wild of Africa. I'm your host, Erik Njoka. Welcome to the show. This week, we focus on the effects of climate change on the continent and how different calamities have split nations in the north and the south, who faced the onset of flash floods and extreme drought at the same time. We'll talk about that shortly. Here's what else is happening in Africa. 20 people, including 13 soldiers, were killed in an attack by gunmen on a military barracks and other locations in Sierra Leone. The West African country was thrown into panic when the assailants attacked the barracks, a police station and a prison, sending gunfire ringing across the capital Freetown. The government blamed the attack on renegade soldiers who it said had been repelled. President Julius Maada Bio said in an address that an investigation has been launched. The United Nations Refugee Agency and the United Nations Children's Fund expressed grave concern over the humanitarian crises unfolding in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Fighting against armed groups and government forces has forcibly displaced over 450,000 people in the last 6 weeks in Rushuru and Masisi territories in North Kivu province. A prominent Ghanaian priest, Cardinal Peter Turkson of the Roman Catholic Church, has spoken against criminalizing homosexuality, challenging the proposed bill in Ghana's parliament that seeks severe penalties for the LGBTQ+ community. The backdrop of this discussion involves ongoing parliamentary debates on a bill that could lead to a 3-year prison sentence for identifying as LGBT, with up to 10 years for those advocating for LGBTQ+ rights. Cardinal Turkson's perspective diverges from the traditional stance of the church, aligning more closely with Pope Francis, who recently indicated openness to blessing same-sex couples. An elephant in Kenya gave birth to a set of twins, a rare event for the planet's largest land mammals. Save the Elephants said that the twins, both female, were born in the Samburu National Reserve in northern Kenya to a mother named Alto, describing it as a double joy. Twins make up only about 1% of elephant births, although another pair, a male and a female, were born in the same reserve in early 2022. And South African anti-apartheid and gay activist Simon Mkholi, who organized Africa's first Pride March in 1990, died 25 years ago, but a group of artists inspired by him are determined to keep his legacy alive in an opera celebrating his life. Vogue Opera, a mix of classical music, hip-hop, protest songs and dance, tells the story of Mkholi, whose activism helped enshrine gay rights in South Africa's constitution, the first country on the continent to do so. Extreme weather events like this are posing an increased risk to nature, buildings, infrastructure, and human health. These events, expected to increase in frequency and intensity because of climate change, are already causing substantial damage and loss. This is being felt in Africa. While the north is drenched in immense flash floods, the south is reeling under unprecedented heat waves and droughts. Here's a report.
Kenya's semi-arid region is accustomed to dry weather and even long droughts. But things have changed now. Most villages and towns are awash with floods. The El Nino phenomenon has brought a climate catastrophe in Africa, with rainwater inundating the east and Horn of Africa. Residents in these regions, including Somalia, have been forced to leave their homes after heavy rains caused some of the rivers, in the case of Kenya, Tana River, to burst banks, flooding surrounding villages.
We fear that our own children would drown in the floods because paths in the village have been washed away. There is water all over and we found ourselves trapped with our animals, so we ran here with the children where it is safe.
Heavy rains linked to the El Nino phenomenon, followed by flash floods, have submerged towns across East Africa, leaving hundreds of thousands of people homeless. In Kenya, the floods caused over 70 deaths.
We are also looking at a situation whereby disease outbreaks related to waterborne and vector-borne diseases are beginning to emerge because besides the primary care for those people with chronic illnesses who normally need to access the health facilities.
If it is the deluge of misery in the north, in the south of the continent, it is the desolation of drought. In a remote southeastern corner of Zimbabwe, about 140 volunteers slept in shifts through a 24-hour annual wildlife census. A valuable indicator of the status of the southern African nation's wildlife resources during a worrying regional drought. To everyone's relief, the rains had come and the grasslands were looking green again in Gonarejo National Park, which means place of elephants. In other reserves in wildlife-rich Zimbabwe, animals have suffered even more as climate change-induced drought conditions take their toll. In Madagascar, an island nation still reeling from the devastating effects of Cyclone Freddy is facing another threat, prolonged heatwave. The scale of the heatwave that hit Madagascar in October is the worst the island has seen for 40 years. According to a scientific study, it is a consequence of climate change caused by human activity. The phenomenon that affected the south of the Indian Ocean island would have been virtually impossible without climate change caused by human activity, stresses the report by the World Weather Attribution, WWA, a global network of scientists that analyzes extreme weather events in real time. Heat peaks are very rarely recorded in Africa, which makes it difficult to accurately study their impact in Madagascar. Nearly 91% of Madagascans live below the poverty line, and half of them have no access to drinking water or electricity, making them very vulnerable to extreme heat. Many live in makeshift accommodations, making it difficult to implement measures to alleviate them. Extreme weather events in Africa claimed over 13,000 lives in 2023, more than on any other continent. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The United Nations is stressing that South Sudan must secure public confidence to ensure that its first post-independence elections in December 2024 will be held peacefully. South Sudan descended into a bloody civil war shortly after independence following a political disagreement between President Salva Kiir and his then deputy Riek Machar that killed about 400,000 people. And this is according to the United Nations. Kiir, Machar and other political leaders signed a peace agreement in 2018 that ended the war. At the end of the transitional period, the country is expected to conduct a general election in December 2024. Here's a report.
South Sudan's parties, leaders and stakeholders have time till the first quarter of 2024 to agree on critical decisions if they wish to see free, fair and credible elections being held on schedule. The United Nations mission in South Sudan has said transitional security arrangements must be completed first for the country's long overdue democratic transition.
Today, the honest assessment of many observers and stakeholders is that the current political and civic operating space does not offer a level playing field. Therefore, it's imperative for the parties to agree on a code of conduct around free, fair and transparent competition. UNMISS cautions against the temptation towards unilateral actions that undermine the trust that is needed amongst all stakeholders.
South Sudanese President Salva Kiir pledged that previously postponed elections will be held on schedule next year and that he would run for president. Kiir, a prominent warlord, is the only president South Sudan has known since he led the country to independence from Sudan in 2011. Since then, the world's youngest country has gone from crisis to crisis. It is held together only by a fragile government of national unity created after a peace agreement between Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar. After a transition period, elections were due to be held in February 2023, but the government has so far failed to meet key clauses of the agreement between Kiir and Machar, including the drafting of a constitution. No other candidate has yet declared his candidacy, but Kiir's historic enemy Riek Machar surely will, say observers. In August, the two leaders extended their transitional government for 2 years, beyond the scheduled date, citing difficulties in implementing their peace agreement.
You comrades from the National Liberation Council, I ask you all to support peace so that development can take place. The revitalized peace agreement has been extended for 2 more years to enable implementation of the agreement before the general elections.
Nearly 400,000 people perished in a 5-year civil war until Kiir and Machar signed their peace agreement in 2018. Since then, the country has suffered floods, hunger, renewed violence and political strife as the promises of the peace agreement were slow to materialize. The United Nations has consistently accused South Sudanese leaders of provoking the violence, violating human rights and draining public finances. South Sudan also holds the 3rd largest oil reserves in sub-Saharan Africa. But even after 12 years of independence, it is unable to feed its 7 million people who live on humanitarian aid. Years of corruption and instability has meant that the country benefits only from 45,000 barrels from an annual production of about 150,000 to 170,000 barrels. For the young nation, the 2024 elections will be a do-or-die affair. The world will be watching how credible these elections will be. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
3 West African nations led by military juntas met for the past weeks to strengthen a newly formed alliance described by some analysts as an attempt to legitimize their military governments amid coup-related sanctions and strained relations with their neighbors. The alliance of Sahel states provides a path of sovereignty for the countries and for their citizens, and this is according to Niger's junta leader. While it provides an opportunity to pool resources, some experts say the military leaders are using the partnership to show their countries are not isolated.
In his first foreign trip since the July coup that brought him to power, Niger's junta leader, General Abdurrahman Chiani, held meetings with his Malian counterpart. While in Mali, the two discussed what both governments called a path of sovereignty for the countries and their citizens. A joint statement said, through the alliance, the people of the Sahel affirm that nothing will prevent them from making this area of the Sahel an area of prosperity. General Chiani then headed to Burkina Faso for a friendship and working visit with Captain Ibrahim Traore. They discussed issues common to both countries, in particular the fight against terrorism and socio-economic development. The 3 Sahel countries of Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso had in September signed a pact that includes provisions for mutual defense in the event of an attack on any of the countries.
La gratitude du gouvernement.
This alliance is the consecration of our determination to wrest back our sovereignty, the sovereignty of the Sahel states, so that the Sahel is no longer a zone of insecurity, but a zone of prosperity for the good of our people.
Burkinabé pour le soutien.
The countries also plan to strengthen economic ties. Chiani thanking his neighbors for standing by his country after Niger's regional and western partners announced sanctions against his coup. Nate Allen, an associate professor at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, says the partnership is in part an effort to legitimize the military governments more than to tackle the violent extremism for which they have a limited capacity to fight. The violence across the Sahel has contributed to a recent surge of coups in the region. The militaries that claim they took over power to tackle their country's security challenges have struggled to do so. General Chiani partly blamed the violence on foreign powers, particularly France, that had been influential in the three countries before being forced out after their militaries took over. And also against West Africa's regional bloc of ECOWAS that heavily sanctioned Niger as a measure to reverse the coups in the region. James Burnett, a researcher specializing in West Africa at the US-based Hudson Institute, says the new partnership offers the military governments of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger an opportunity to say, we are not internationally isolated and we actually have partners that share our ideology and philosophy. Analysts also believe that by pooling their resources, the countries are able to reduce individual reliance on foreign countries. Researchers in the Sahel region feel that the long-term success of the alliance depends both on the resources that member countries can mobilize and the support that Africans and the broader international community can provide. The regimes are also united in the fight against jihadism in the countries. Shortly after taking power, Chiani pledged to return Niger to civilian rule within 3 years. Mali, meanwhile, has indefinitely postponed a presidential election scheduled for early next year.
The transitional government informs the public that it has decided to organize exclusively the presidential election to emerge from the transition. The other elections will certainly be the subject of another calendar, which will be established by the new authorities under the directives of the new president of the republic. However, the dates of the presidential election initially scheduled for Sunday, February 4th, 2024, the first round, and Sunday, February 18th, 2024.
Mali plans to host ministers from the three countries for meetings in order to iron out operational details of the new Sahel alliance. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Do you need to release your pent-up stress? Nigerians have found a unique solution in Lagos, the Shadow Rage Room. For $8, visitors can enjoy a 20-minute session of breaking glass, smashing wardrobes, and destroying electronics, providing an outlet for frustrations. Our correspondent Louisa Olaniyi paid them a visit.
For Anita Christian, this is a way she can process her pain after her friend died last year. She's a customer at Shadow Rage Room in Nigeria's megacity Lagos.
So I had to come and vent because, you know, when you don't get clarity or closure, it's really sad. So yeah, that was one of the reasons why I came to Rage today.
It's an unusual form of therapy, a place where visitors can destroy electronic devices, break glass and smash wardrobes without any consequences. The inspiration for this Rage Room, says co-founder Njoka Babajide James, was a rising mental health crisis in Nigeria.
We understand that mental health is a taboo topic among individuals, especially in Nigeria and in Lagos. And the truth is we all go through some form of problems. And, you know, so we want to create a community of like mind to make people, you know, to understand that, you know, this thing is real.
James acknowledges that some people see the business as promoting anger, but says that's not what they're doing. Social media manager Nancy Igwe says she was really angry before her first 20-minute session.
First thing, if you think about the economic situation of Nigeria and how it affects, you know, it might not affect everybody, but to me, living in Lagos, it's terribly, it's frustrating.
As well as a soaring cost of living, Nigerians are grappling with a disputed presidential election and widespread insecurity. It's perhaps no wonder, therefore, that some feel the need to release a little rage.
From the cost of living crisis to naira shortages, fear of insecurity, and the stigma of dealing with mental health challenges, that comes with all of these. Nigerians grapple with a lot on a daily basis, and having to discover a place to vent sure comes with relief. Right here is a place where with just 7,500 naira, well above $8, individuals and groups can recognize and address their frustrations in a healthier manner by smashing any and everything within their reach in the next 20 minutes. The effect afterwards, according to patrons, is fulfilling. Well, from Lagos, Nigeria, the Shadow Ridge Room in Omole Phase 1, Louisa Olani, WION, World is One.
Recycling plastic waste is gathering momentum in Addis Ababa. It's all part of efforts to combat urban decay in the Ethiopian capital. Here now is a report.
Most of the plastic bottles are being properly recycled, but the issue with plastic bags persists. There are regulations in place regarding plastic bags. It is prohibited to produce, sell or import plastic bags that are below the designated thickness specified by the rules.
Working as a rubbish collector is undeniably challenging, given that we have no other viable option to make ends meet. But it would improve the situation if people could separate plastic items from glass bottles.
Well, thank you very much for watching this week's episode of Wild of Africa. Get in touch with us on all our social media platforms and share your feedback about the show there. My name is Erik Njoka. Keep watching WION World is One. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
Hostilities have broken out between Israel and Palestine, and the tensions that had been gathering steam over the course of the last several weeks and months.
The siren has gone off. I don't know if you can hear in the background what's going on. I'm going into the shelter now. So it's a very, very serious situation here across Israel. It's a state of emergency.
The United States stands with Israel.
Well, we are starting this broadcast with a developing story from West Asia, where Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Hamas has launched a war against the state of Israel.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
New drug is making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. This medicine helps slow down a patient's cognitive